Pretty good way to get everybody's attention. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for St. Paul's Church. We thank you for the generations that have called this place home. We thank you for equipping the people of this church to share your love with this community and the world. Help us hear and celebrate stories of your presence among us. Guide us as we go forth from this place. May we treasure these memories and carry your Spirit with us everywhere we go. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. Amen. Come on in if you're coming in and find a seat. This is a wonderful day, and we're going to do something that I've kind of wanted to do for a while. And I've had a conversation with everybody here, sort of casual one-on-one conversations, but I've never had a chance to hear in a setting like this people who have called this church their home for a while share about their experience here. I've got a couple of prompts for the members of our panel, but I hope you also will think of some questions or ideas or reflections, because this is a chance for all of us to share. Let me start by asking every member of the panel to tell us their name and about when they started coming to St. Paul's the first time. Some of y'all have had a break, so I'll go first. My name is Evan Garner. I'm not really on the panel, but I thought I'd set an example. And I've been coming to St. Paul's since the summer of 2018. Bill, hold that microphone right here.
Does this work?
Yeah.
Is it on?
Yeah.
My name's Bill Harbison, and I really can't remember the first time I was ever in St. Paul's. I've been in and out of St. Paul's for a little over 80 years, and the reason I can't remember is I was baptized here, and people, I don't remember when I was 3 months old what was going on.
So your whole life. Your whole
My
life.
whole
That's
life,
great.
yeah.
Would you pass that to Bass and let him tell us? Thank you.
I'm Bass Trumbo. I've been a member of St. Paul's since I was 10 years old. That's quite a ways back. I've loved the church, and they let me sing in the choir, although I wasn't very good. But anyway, it's fun to be here and tell you a few stories about the past.
Thank you, Bass. Thank you.
I'm Ann Harbison, and Bill is my brother, and we were baptized in 1942 by the Reverend Martin. And I have been a member continuously since that time in this church, and I've done many, many different duties. Now I'm ushering at 7:30, but I've done altar guild and all of the other things at the kitchen and helped with community meals.
Thank you.
Like Evan, I'm a recent arrival. I'm Patty Henson Sullivan, and we transferred here from Ascension Parish in Lafayette, Louisiana, 25 years ago.
My name's Randall Woods. My wife Rhoda and I and our son and daughter Jeff and Nicole came here in 1971. The kids were 1 and 2. This was our first, and it will be our last family.
My name is Bill Clark. I've been a member here since, Connie and I are disputing this, but we think 1977, when when I graduated from law school. And I've been on the vestry a couple of times, been senior warden once when Ginger Crisp was unable to serve or fill out her term, and done community meals and taught Sunday school 4th through 6th grade for over a decade, and then had a reprise a couple of years ago when my daughter was teaching Sunday school. So,
And every time
love
Bill,
this place.
Every time Bill's been on the vestry, we've elected a new rector. We've called a new rector. So if y'all put him back on the vestry, I'm gonna get nervous.
I've got to say that my wife, she was promoted from parish secretary to become the first female senior warden at St.
I
Paul.
didn't know that. Thank you. So members of the panel, whoever would like to share, what do you remember? What was St. Paul's like when you first came here, or if you were very young when you came here? What was St. Paul's like when you first remember it? How would you describe the St. Paul's of your initial experience? Whoever would like to go.
I'll
Bill?
start.
Yeah, thanks.
When we first came in '77, we noticed that we were very lucky to have this as a church home because the nave is the same now as it was then. It's gorgeous. And we were very appreciative of those who had been before us, who had thought enough of the Episcopal Church and in particular St. Paul's Episcopal Church to invest time, talent, money into this beautiful facility. And so Connie and I, when we got here, were just excited to have this as a church home. And I'd been at Trinity Cathedral growing up in Little Rock and went to Episcopal High School in Virginia, so I had the Episcopal Church in my blood.
Ed Salmon was the rector here, and he welcomed us. We came here from that accursed land, Texas, and so we had a lot of problems initially. But the church itself looks just like it did when we came, and everything's changed, but nothing's really changed.
It's so true. The room we're sitting in wasn't here when we arrived 25 years ago. We had what I refer to as the Jetsons kitchen, if you all remember, the old parish hall kitchen with the really Jetsons-looking dishwasher. When my husband took a job in Fayetteville and we decided to move from Louisiana, kicking and screaming, Lafayette is a great town, Fayetteville as well. We were introduced to the Episcopal Church by someone who's sitting here who's visiting. Beth Brooks is in the room. Beth, who was on the vestry then, and Susie Freeman. We met to talk about St. Paul's at the 36 Club our first night in Fayetteville.
My first memories of I was standing on the kneelers trying to look around and see what was going on. Also, for some reason, I remember this big white thing that was at the entrance of the church. And later I found out that this was a baptismal font that was at the entrance of the church. Those are my first memories of, and of course, the window over the altar.
Bass, how would you describe the church? You or Bill, how would you describe, what was St. Paul's like back then? Smaller? And if you
I
do,
don't think it's really changed that much, although I know women were supposed to wear hats when they're in church, and there were ushers that took you to your seat. And of course, a number of us had sat in the same place for years, so they wanted to make sure we were happy with where we're sitting. But a lot of great memories. There was, taught Sunday school. I remember teaching senior high girls Sunday school, and all they talked about was how they hated their mothers.
some things don't change.
Yeah, and I tried to get back and smooth that out a little bit, but it was a lively class, so that's what I remember.
Sure. Bill, what about you? How would you describe St. Paul's during your childhood?
Well, I wasn't here as a child.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that Bill
This
is,
Bill.
I'm sorry, Bill.
It was a real, what I would consider what it is today. Back then, it's small. People interacted same as you do today. But what I really remember is the house, the white frame house, that's set in approximately where we are today. That was the parish hall and had a big dining room in it. But the most memorable thing about it is one Sunday morning it had rained and there was a big puddle of water out there between the church And I just love to run through that puddle of water. And I think the reason I liked it so well, or remember it so well, my mother was very unhappy with me.
I love y'all. Almost every person mentioned how similar it was then to it is today. I mean, even though the buildings are different, the people are different, the size is different, y'all all point to continuity, whether it's continuity of the building, continuity of the spirit of the place. And Randall might have something to say about this, but it feels to me like when we study history, when we study changes in people and places and buildings, we're studying change, and yet often when I'm reading the history, it fails to convey to me how much continuity there has been in the spirit of this place over that year. I find that a fascinating reality that y'all don't point to the ways it's different, which is sort of my experience, but y'all speak to its continuity. I love that.
One of the things that's remarkable about this is the commitment of this parish family to inclusiveness. We went through the prayer book revision, women in the priesthood, gay marriage. This church has never wavered in its commitment to inclusion, to the broadest definition of God's family, and that in the context of today's divisions in church, that's a remarkable thing.
Agreed. Yeah. Who would share for us a happy memory from your time at St. Paul's? Any particular moments from your life or your family's life that you remember being joyful besides splashing in a puddle and experiencing your mother's wrath? Any other happy memories that you would share?
I'm going to tell two things, and then that's it. When we came here, we went over to Ed Salmon's for a picnic, and my elegant and sophisticated daughter, who's been on the vestry several times, was asked, she was 3 years old, was asked by Ed, "What would you like to drink, young lady?" And she says, "Beer." And one second thing, and then I'll be quiet. Rhoda and I were teaching senior high school, and one of the kids said, well, they were talking about sex and religion. What if my boyfriend and I were on a desert island, and we were stranded there, and there was no church, nobody to marry us, would sex be permissible? And Rhoda and I said, well, if the commitment is there and the love is there, of course. Well, we got calls from many a parent, and so Ed Salmon, the priest, came to us, and he said, Rhoda and Randall, the correct answer to that is, you will never be on a desert island.
Teachers are held to a higher standard, aren't they, as James writes? Yeah. Who else has a fun story?
Well, I don't have a funny story, but obviously the highlight of my time here was when our daughter Susan was married, and then we've had 4 grandchildren baptized, and with Rose in attendance back there. Of course, the highlight is always the Christmas pageant when he was in charge of it. And I remember John W. Cole and I having to wrestle do you call them staffs or crooks, from the shepherds before we would keep them and give them to them when they walked down and grab them when they came back, because there were a lot of sword fights with those things. And of course, I have so many memories of teaching Sunday school with most of your children, grandchildren. It was, and with Betsy Corwin, who's upstairs now, still teaching Sunday school. It's just a wonderful place. And I will follow up on the second question you asked, and that is, what's the best thing about St. Paul's? The people. Connie and I have made so many good friends, and you couldn't ask for a better congregation. Even though a lot of us are not exactly the same tilt in lots of ways, we all have one mission, and that is to serve God.
Who else has a joyful memory? Ann, go ahead.
Okay, I just want to make sort of a distinction of how things are different today than
Yeah.
they were then. Because in the 1950s, all our mothers dressed to the hilt when they brought us to church, and they tried to dress us the same way. And, they had their heels and hose and hats, and the little girls had their dresses and their hats and their little gloves. And this is kind of a distinction from today because, it's a lot more casual. But, that was important. I remember my rabbit fur coat that I had with a muff and a hat that matched. And I'm sure I had shoes that were black patent leather also. But, these are our memories that I have of dressing up to come to church. Thank you.
Patty? Oh, Bass first, and then Patty.
I just wanted to mention a couple of memories. The church was having their fundraising drive, and those members who hadn't turned in a pledge card, I was on the vestry with Roy Giles, and they gave us 5 or 6 cards, pledge cards, to go visit a number of people. And my main recollection is we went to visit my brother Don Trumbull. And he was a member, but I don't think he'd ever been in the church, maybe since baptism. But we went by his house, and he was out in the yard, and Roy said, well, Don, we're by to see if you wanted to make a pledge for St. Paul's for the coming year. And he said, yeah. He reached in his pocket and gave us a $5 bill. And I remember Roy said, Don, I think you need this $5 more than the church.
Touche. I'm going to remember that. That's a good one.
There was one other I wanted to mention. I was visiting someone that was in assisted living quarters, and I was taking them communion. And I got in there and opened up the communion box, and there wasn't any wine in the communion box. And I thought, boy, this isn't going to work. And the lady said, just a minute. And she reached under her bed and brought out a bottle of wine. And I figured it's not going to hurt to use the wine.
I love it. I love it. Patty, if y'all pass the microphone that way to.
We moved here. Ben and Sarah were 1 and 3. And you all remember when your children are that age, when you take them from the nursery into church, that it's very lively. And the following year at 2 and 4, they were learning to come back from communion, and I was too far ahead of them and had already walked back toward my seat. And I don't know if you remember, but with your parents at that age, you really want your kids to behave while they're in this large church with a long, long aisle. And I looked back because they weren't behind me, and I realized that they were trying to decide who would come first back from communion. Up in front of the church, God, everyone, and I see this. I see the arm go here, the arm go there. The next thing, there's just kind of a brawl on the way back from communion, and I was too far away to stop it. And what I will say, and we talk about welcoming, everyone thought it was humorous, and the moms around me were patting me on the back and giving me hugs after service and telling their own equally scandalous stories of young children in church. In fact, my son Ben used to look for Denise Garner because somehow her boys are a little bit older. She would mysteriously have a Hot Wheels car in her purse frequently. And so when Ben was little, he would be crawling around in the pews looking for Denise so he could play with the toy from her purse. And those are such dear memories. One more thing to add about Ben and Sarah received nothing but messages of love, grace, and inclusion through their entire time as children and to adults. And that's remarkable. That wasn't my experience when I was growing up in various churches as we moved from my father's military career. And the idea that we've all had this great message of love and inclusion is powerful.
I want to follow up about children in church. In the 80s, I don't know if you all remember, but dollars and coins were put into the plate as it passed. And we had 3 small children, and I took the plate, put some money in, and they always put coins in. And I gave it to one of my children. They all deny which one. And the next thing you know, the plate is clanging on the ground. And coins and dollars are everywhere. And I don't remember how it turned out, but I remember that I hurried out of church that day.
How many people in this room were married at St. Paul's? Yeah. And keep your hands up. How many of you have a child who was married at St. Paul's? So either you or a child was married at St. Paul's. What about a sibling? Anybody else? Yeah. So there are a lot of marriage stories, I bet. How about funerals? How many of you have buried a member of your immediate family, a sibling, a parent, or a child at St. Paul's? Yeah, a number of us, but not as many as I would have expected. Yeah. What are some big sacramental moments, whether it was a part of your family or another family, where you felt like St. Paul's did this community proud? Have there been moments, weddings or funerals or other moments where you were proud of the way that we cared for someone in need? Yeah.
When Nicole was 15 and my son was 14, Sarah Brown, her dear friend, died of an aneurysm. And Jim Powell, who was EYC leader here, very close to the children, died in a car wreck. But that brought the church. Everybody reached out to each other. Those deaths were both a tragedy and a triumph for us.
Anybody else on the panel have a story about?
I remember when Connie's mom died in 1999, there was a service in South Carolina where she lived, but the ashes were brought back to Connie and to me, and we talked with Lowell and said, Lowell, is there anything we can do here? We would like her to be in the columbarium so that she can be there, Connie can be there, and I can be on the other side. And Lowell said, we're going to have a service. And so he had a service for us, just Connie's dad, who was here, Connie, me, and maybe a few of the children, sat in the choir pews and had a small service, and then we had a committal in the columbarium. And that little act of kindness was something that will stay with me probably forever.
Any other stories? Yeah, Bass, would you hand that?
I've always loved the funeral liturgy. I mean, it is amazing. It's almost like Shakespearean. It's the music and the choir, and I wasn't in any hurry for mine, but the choir's always been so good. But there's something about the wording that just sticks in my mind.
Thank you. Yeah, Ann.
I'll make a comment about my mother's funeral here. Carolyn Harris did the eulogy, and it just, I don't know, it uplifted me. I don't know how sometimes a funeral service can be uplifting, but it is. And I would like to make a comment about Evan did a service for a friend, actually a teacher friend of mine, And he was not a member of this congregation, but she was. And he did the most wonderful service for a non-member in this church, but for Lee, his wife. I thought it was just absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna ask the audience if you've got questions or comments to share in a minute, so be thinking about that. Any other big marriage or funeral stories that y'all want to share? Let me ask the members of the panel, other than the people and the burial liturgies, but what makes you proud to be a part of St. Paul's? When someone in the community says, oh yeah, you go to St. Paul's, what makes you, what fills your heart with joy and pride to be able to say to somebody, yeah, I'm a part of St. Paul's? What is it? Yeah.
Seven Hills Community Clinic, Magdalene House, community meals. You all keep adding. I don't know if
CEO.
everybody in the room knows that these. I remember when Seven Hills was a notebook with a graduate student in the hallway, and it's an enormous community driver community clinic. The last count, 42,000 patients at community clinic, and Magdalene House, and more recent, as well as community meals. I'm so proud of St. Paul's, just the giving to the community. That outreach is powerful and large and affects all of Northwest Arkansas.
Thank you. What else? What else fills you with that? Yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
What else makes you proud to be a part of St. Paul's?
I'll have to echo her. The outreach is unreal in this church, and I am, glad to be a part of it. So it's, I may get emotional because I feel fairly deeply a part of this church.
Thank you. Other things that make you proud to be a part of this church? Bass? Yeah, take that microphone for me, Bass. Right. Yep.
Well, it's just one of those memories that I have tucked away, but Mary Slinloff had been the rector here for many, many years, and he was great, but he was beginning to have trouble with his sermons. His health was declining, and so the vestry met and decided that it was really time for him to retire. So they looked around and said, well, of course, somebody's got to go out there to his house. And they looked around, and I was the youngest member of the vestry. And I thought, you got to be kidding. But I did go out and visit with him. I mean, he could see it coming. I think it was kind of like a relief to him because he was having substantial health problems. But he was great, and anyway, I don't recall how many years he was here, but he was here for a long time. But
And this church loved him and supported him even in that transition, which isn't always easy, right? Yeah.
I believe
Bill?
he was here from 44 to 69.
Yeah, 25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, as rector.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other moments? Any other memories? Yeah, Bill.
I have a moment that in this church has had so many wonderful moments. There have been a few dark ones, but I want to compliment someone on the panel here because there was a period of time, a very short period, where this church had no priest. And members of this community stood in and performed morning prayer, services, and one of those members is right here. Randall, how many services did you conduct, do you think?
I'm going to have to answer for this. I know the bishop's going to call me up, any day now. But probably it was over about a 3-month period, 2 or 3 month period.
Yeah, and I think also, did Steve Adams perform some too? I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So members of this community, we weren't going to let St. Paul's fail. And thanks to Randall and Steve and other people here, we have continued on unbroken.
Yeah, my nickname is the Heretic. So
Let me borrow this. All right, who has a question or a comment for the panel, or your own reflections, your own answers to some of the questions? Let me hand this
take
to
this
Christine. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I just want to say I came here in 1988, and I had my daughter Catherine in 1989, and I have two only children. One is 33 and one is 21. Both were confirmed here. Two of the women sitting at my table, my daughter grew up with their children. I have formed lasting relationships with these women. I'm looking around. Susan Hayes just left. Mike Hayes sat behind when Miles was growing up. Did not help Miles behave during church and really antagonized him, and me and his father were just trying to get him to behave in church. Like I said, Mike didn't help, but I remember other things, like the altar was not always there. It was just against the wall, and the priest, their back was turned to us, and again, this was not here. We would be remiss without Mr. Charlie was a part of both of my children's lives growing up, and choir camp was instrumental. And not just Betsy Corwin, but also Albert Gray was a Sunday school teacher to both of my kids. But the thing that St. Paul's, other than the community outreach and the nonprofits that were born out of here, were both of my kids are generous and giving and inclusive because of their experience here.
Amen. Hey, Evan? Sandy?
Sorry. I'm just going to jump on something that Ann said earlier. We came in 2000, and we'd been at Trinity Cathedral, which is kind of a different vibe than St. Paul's. And we got here, we realized Ann, my youngest, hadn't packed any Sunday shoes, which was very typical of her, because if you knew her, she's quite a tomboy at that time. So we went to Payless, because it was open after 6 o'clock. When we got to town, got her a pair of shoes to, cram her little feet into to come to church. And then she got here, and everyone's in jeans and khaki shorts. And she's just like, what the heck? Why did I have to get dressed up to come to church? And that was the last time I think my daughters ever wore dresses to church. So I appreciate that St. Paul's has always been so welcoming, and that we can get up and come to church, because as they told me, God doesn't care what we wear to church, Mom. And they were probably right. But, it was just a whole different shift in our thinking about what church was and how this community was so different from what we had. Not that there's anything wrong with either one, but just when I go back to visit now, Emma's at Trinity Cathedral, and I'm reminded of people still dress for church in Little Rock. I mean, for better or for worse. It's just a different situation. But I love St. Paul's because of that inclusivity, and the youth directors who've always been here. I'll say a shout out to them, and Charlie and others, so thank you.
I have a memory of being on the vestry one time when we were asked what to do with folks whose ashes were unclaimed, and no one knew who they were. And St. Paul's received the ashes, and they're scattered someplace sacred on our grounds. And I was very honored that our church was that way, that we welcome everyone, and I'm very proud to be part of it.
Thank you. Who else has a question or a comment? Yeah.
Thank you. So a couple funny stories first. My family comes here, and Michael's in the choir, and my parents have been very involved for a long time, and we kind of do the ebb and flow of church. But one of my best memories is I used to bring my therapy dog, because dogs are welcome at 7:30, and he was a basset hound, and so he'd come to service with me sometimes. Except that one time I went up for communion, and I had him, and he decided that was the best time to shake his head and slobber all over right by the altar. And I was mortified. Everybody laughed. And as a I like to say recovering Catholic, that was mortifying. But here I realized that it's fine. It was okay. Same thing when my daughter was baptized. She was talking the whole time and jumping around when it was her turn. And she asked Evan if the water that was going to be used to baptize her was hot or cold, like in the middle of service. This is a very beautiful moment. And he was great. He just said, "It's warm. Would you like to feel it before we baptize you?" And she was like, "Yes, please." And it was just a magical moment that I'll never forget. And one other thing I'm very thankful for, years ago, I had a classmate I graduated with who sadly took her own life. And the fact that we had a service here for her was very, very moving, because there are certain places where they won't do that, in that instance. And that really helped all of us grieve. And I think it was a really important part of the healing. And I was always very thankful that St. Paul's will do that to help the family and the friends. So thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more reflection or question. Yeah, Harrison, right there.
I appreciate everything you guys had to say. I want to actually ask a question, and looking forward, not backwards. What do you guys see as a challenge or the biggest challenge to the future of St. Paul's?
Thank you. That's great. That's how I wanted to end. So let me hand the microphone back to the panel, these experts who we have put in this position to tell the future for us. But no, seriously, where you sit, what do you see as some of the big challenges, and what are your hopes in response to those challenges? And give everybody a chance to answer if you'd like.
I think our biggest challenge is finding enough room in our small area that we have here in Fayetteville to handle all of our people that want to be part of our church. We've got to expand, but how are we going to do it?
I suppose one of the things I keep in mind is the budget and the pledges and having enough money to do what we need to do on expansion. And I suppose every church is faced with the same thing. And some years are better than others, but just thinking in the future, the church can only accomplish what where there's money enough to do it. And of course, that's like a family. But I think generally speaking, the parishioners have been pretty good about that, but they, can always do better.
Thank you. Chair of the Stewardship Campaign for 2023. Thank you, Pastor.
Well, I think one of my worst moments occurred in this room several years ago when we were talking about expansion, and it came up, the lady I was sitting with, we'll just bulldoze down the church and build a larger church, and I prayed to God right then. At least keep the church until they bury me from this church.
The challenge for us is something that we'll meet, and that's just keep being who we are. Just keep being who you are. I mean, things are tough. People are divided. It causes us or me to question, but we are a family. We will get ourselves through this, and we will be a beacon for people in this time of division, I think.
How do you follow that? As chairman of the Plan Giving Committee, please remember St. Paul's in your will, and that's the way we can continue this wonderful service and continue to have the wonderful church that we enjoy.
Thank you. May we say thank you to our panel for sharing today? Thank you all so much. Before you leave, take a look at the panels around the room. We produced those back when we were doing the Raise the Roof campaign. They've been updated a little bit in one or two spots, but they tell a wonderful story, the story we all know and love. I'm so glad to be here today. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to what the future holds. Thank you.